your host for today's session. The theme of our webinar today is preparing next generation owners to become next generation members to become future owners. Um, it's an important topic, to be honest, because we often hear families speak about preparing the next generation for leadership positions and to join the business, and most of the focus is on that, and we don't hear much about preparing next generation as future owners. And there is I believe a difference in the role, the skills, the competencies, and even in the process of preparing the next generation to become future owners. So we are very lucky today to have with us Professor Dr. Sabine Rao from Germany to explain to us this topic using her experience in the field. Before we move on, I would like to cover a few notes about today's session. It's going to run for about 90 minutes. We have divided the presentation into 5 parts. First, we will have an introduction for our guest speakers. Then we will have Professor Dr. Sabine Rao to take us through her presentation about preparing the next generation as future owners or to become future owners. We will then have a discussion where we will Mr. Rami Turkey, who is our guest also in this session, who will help us understand the topic from the local aspect and how it happens in Saudi family businesses using his own experience coming from a leading family business. Then we will have, of course, some time to cover the audience questions before we conclude the session. I would like to now introduce our speakers for today. We are very lucky to have with us Professor Dr. Sabine Rao from Germany. She is a partner at Peter May Family Business Consulting in Germany, which is the leading firm for advising family businesses. Professor Sabine is through her work with the firm has worked with so many families to help them prepare their next generation members. She also moderates succession processes with many families and help those families to develop their own family charter or family governance rules and policies. She is a very known and a leading professor and a researcher in the family business field. She is currently visiting professor at the University of Ottawa in Canada. She is also visiting at the University of Technology in Berlin. She teaches at the University of Luxembourg as well. And she has published a lot of papers throughout her academic career. Some of them are quite influential in this field. So we are very lucky to have her with us today. I would also like to introduce our second guest speaker, Mr. Rami Turkey. Rami, mashallah, is a leading family business leader in Saudi. He is quite young, who belongs to the second or the new generation. Mr. Rami is the chairman of a Turkey group and the CEO, and he also chairs the group's subsidiaries. He began his career many years ago in New York, where he joined Arthur Andersen, the management consulting firm. And today he plays a very important role in shaping his own family's business as it stands and as we know it. So we are also very lucky to have him with us today in this session, and we believe he will add a lot of value and perspective to make us understand what are these best practices and these recent thoughts in the family business field translate into the Saudi family business context. So Sabina, I would like to hand over to you now to take us through your presentation.
First have to learn about technology. Welcome everybody, good evening. I'm very happy to be with you. I'm speaking to you from Berlin. So I hope technology makes it easy for you to understand me. I would like to start with sharing a quote that one of my early mentors, Miguel Gallo, brought to my attention. It is of Cicero, and he said, "Let him beware of thinking only of the honor that it brings, but let him be sure also that he has the ability to succeed. At the same time, let him take care not to lose heart too readily through discouragement, nor yet to be overcompetent through ambition. In a word, before undertaking any enterprise, careful preparation must be made." Now, we are talking about the incoming owners of your family businesses. And the owners are the important, decisive force in any family business. What we say is that within a family, it is important to be seen, to be understood, to be loved. In the business, it's important that you are able to take decisions. And in preparing incoming owner means to help them to develop whatever it needs to take good decisions for the business and the future. Let me share with you something else which looks at the topic with a little bit more sense of humor. Here it says, "I want you to meet my son Edward."
أريد أن تقابل ابني إدوارد، وأعتقد أيضا حان الوقت للكل أن تعرفوا
better. Well, and what we don't want is a kind of Edward who is obviously not aware of the requirements, who will not meet any kind of expectations of neither the leaders of the business nor of other stakeholders of the business. What we are looking for are well-equipped young people to take over from our generation. I'm belonging to the now generation. And we are, in a way, we are preparing to leave the ownership to the next generation. Now, what do they need? And I would like to take you through different levels, because it's not as easy as it seems at the beginning, but it's not complicated. There is this, what we call the individual level. So it's about me and what I'm bringing to this business.
لكن هذا العمل الذي يجعلني مسؤولة كل المسؤولية أو أن.
But then there is also the family, and there is the business itself. So there are other people involved. Even if I would be the perfect incoming next generation owner, there might be structures around that kind of hinder this incoming next generation member to be as successful as possible. And then there are old stories, and we have to talk about old stories, because sometimes, and that's very tragic then, old stories come into the picture, and however everybody is trying hard, they are not able to overcome the old stories, and these old stories kick in as well. And last but not least, we have to, as a now gen, let the next gen do what they are prepared for, because then we can see really responsible, well-prepared next generation members who are still waiting to take over because the old generation does not step down. So this is what I would like you to take along. By the way, not letting the next generation step up to take over when we are among the academics and the family business field, we call it the Prince Charles syndrome. Okay, we start with the individual level, which is about what can I do? potentas. First of all, yes, incoming owners have to have knowledge and skills. They don't have to have all business training, but they need to be able to read the balance sheet. If they, for example, want in a rather classical governance structure, become the president of the board, they are the first who are talking on a constant basis with the CEO. Can you imagine a young next generation member confronted with a gifted and ambitious CEO who has no idea what it means to lead a business? Not a good idea. So the next generation needs to get good education and develop their skills right away. They can lead a hospital. They can build a school. That is not what would stand in the way, but they should live up to their full potential and show this. And they need some experience. You have to be been there. When we are talking about owners taking decisions, it's very good if they have made their first mistakes in an area where they don't have to pay with their family's money. So go abroad, work for one of the big four, for another family business, for whatever, or as I said, building a hospital, but have some life experience in order to fill this room, in order to have examples. And also, one of the best ways of leading when you are young, and I kept it, is asking questions. Those who come up with the really good questions, not the complicated ones. Often there are simple ones. Those that come up with these questions are leading the way because they start people thinking in the one or the other direction. But in order to have the good questions, you have to have life experience. And finally, you have to want it. We have had the case last year here in Germany with a large family business where the son and the daughter, both in their mid-end 30s, the father wanted them to step in as owners. And they both refused. They refused because they said, we've got our lives, we've got our profession, we've got our family, and we have enough to live from. We don't want this responsibility. So if there is not this motivation, there is no way of making them owners, because disinterested owners are dangerous owners. Something in the upbringing and education most likely went wrong. In this case, I can share it with you because I'm not sharing the name, and I apologize for that. It was that for their father, the company was much more important than any of the children. And the children felt like second or third tier after the business. And it made them so first sad and angry, but later they kind of disaggregated from the business and from the father, that they turned him down when he asked them to step in as owners. It's a very sad story because he built a brilliant business that he took over from his uncle and his father and grew it considerably. Now he will make it a trust. Well, life tells stories. Let's look at a list, and I'm very happy for those who are interested to share this. What do we have as knowledge and skills? I already gave you some ideas. Yes, we need basic business knowledge and skills. And yes, it's financial literacy. Yes, it's structure and strategy. Yes, it's marketing and leadership. But we should know about our family business. your next generation should really be immersed with the business. I mean, I'm coming from a business family, and I've been working in that business. We were producing deep frozen food, and I was at the production belt there as a student to earn some money, yes. But it was 8 hours at this one point doing the one thing, and it really motivated me to go to university, I can tell you. But I learned about the history of our family's business. I learned about the products and later about the markets. There were many of our business partners that came to our house for dinner or for lunch. And it was for me a very normal habit to exchange with them. Later I learned about the structure of our business. And yes, the next gen needs to know the family and needs to know about the family. A family has a history. Often you have a family business legacy. If you have a legacy in your family, share it. It's such a powerful tool. You have a family tree, you have people, and if you have the opportunity, next generation members need soft skills. They need communication and moderation skills, and they need to know how to deal with conflict. And I know we all don't have conflict, of course not, only sometimes. Well, conflict is part of life. With conflict, we become innovative. With conflict, we look for new ways to solve a problem. So let's embrace conflict, but learn how to deal with conflict in a way that is not hurting others, because we're a family and we want to live and work together for a long time. We need work experience, and we need to help them to become an expert and help them to exchange with other family business members. Whether it's a forum like this one, hopefully after COVID, face-to-face again, it's the Family Business Network, it's YPO, whatever it is, let's talk about it. Others have the same ideas and problems. Motivation, our next generation should accept their duties and rights as an owner, therefore they need to know them. And they really have to want to become an owner. There is a French family that only allows their heirs to become owners after they have bought one share, which is about 10,000 euro, with money that they earned themselves. If you don't do this, you are not allowed to become an owner, even as a young heir of your family's wealth. You can have the money, but you have to sell the shares. Shareholders, they say, have to be active, and they have to really want to be shareholders. They have to be proud to be a family member and support the weaker family members. Right, let's turn to the family and the business group. Imagine you are the family member, and I give you another example from a family where there was the daughter who was highly capable of becoming the major owner, majority owner. In that family, there's always a majority owner, and the others have to follow the speaker of the owners. And there were 3 brothers, and much later, the one brother became the speaker, not the stronger daughter, and it was not a gender thing. Much later, one of the non-family managers of the C-level, when I met him, I asked him, and I said, why did you support in that case? Why did you support the son over the daughter? And he taught me a lesson. He said, you know why? Because this son was much easier to manipulate for us as the management team than this daughter. The daughter was much smarter and more intelligent. And I was like taken aback. But from the way that this non-family manager was looking at his own career, the daughter was trouble and the son was the easy one to take. It was not good for the business, by the way. So at the group level, family members have to accept your incoming owners. One day, I've got 3 children and I've got a small family business. I'm not there to keep them calm. Now, once I've passed away, all the old conflicts and discussions will come up. So better working today to help them to really solve their questions in a way that they don't need their mother or their father to moderate. They're old enough to do that. Later, they might get us into trouble. There are non-active owners and active owners. They have to understand each other, and you have to be accepted in order to keep the shareholders group together. From the shareholders, you are having board members, right? So if your incoming next generation becomes owner, they might work their way up to become then a board member, right? And also there are friends and acquaintances and other outside shareholders, stakeholders who need to accept the incoming owners. We all need support. We need legitimacy. And that means that other people are granting us resources only if they accept us. So the incoming generation, the next generation owners need to be aware that without the support of a lot of people, they will not be able to be responsible owners in their businesses. They are not dictators in their businesses. They are dependent on other people. And then past, present, future. Yes, there are narratives, structures, and old conflicts. I give you another example from a part of the family business of my family. My father kicked out my uncle, the husband of his sister, at the very beginning from the company, because my grandmother wanted him to lead the company, but my father wanted to take over. So that was management. Later, this uncle became a board member representing their branch as owners in one of our subsidiaries. And when we had to raise capital because the company grew very fast, he always said no. He had a blocking vote for this branch. So it was the old conflict that made a owner's decision very bad. It influenced it in a very bad way, and it hindered the company to grow in a healthy way. And it was not about the business, it was not about the numbers, it was nothing but you had this conflict with me back then and you won. Now I will keep you from doing what you want to do, where you need my acknowledgement. Old narratives work. As I said, do you have a legacy? Tell it, keep it. It's a treasury. But old narratives work badly if there are bad narratives. So be careful about the bad narratives. And role models work. You know, when I'm giving presentations on upbringing of next generation members, my last slide is always saying, and whatever you think about my presentation, and whatever you think about all the concepts of good upbringing and education, you can forget about all of this because your children will anyway do what they see you doing. This is what we do. We kind of repeat what our parents show us. So look for good role models for the incoming owners. Give them the opportunity to be together with people you really like for their way of being an owner, because they will learn from them and they will kind of learn the patterns of how to be an owner. And then is the question, whose conflict is it? Is it the conflict of our generation, or is it the conflict of our parents' generation? And the same question goes to our children. Sometimes there are these old inherited conflicts. Forget about them. It's not about the next generation. If the next generation can make itself free from the old conflict, chances to become good and responsible owners who help the company to decide are much better. And last but not least, you need structure. And so I would like to spend the second part of this presentation on how do we find the questions, because all your businesses, or each of your business, is different from each other. It would be very nice to sit in one room and to share where you are, at what point in a development and structure your business is. But as we have our COVID situation, let me give you an idea where you yourself, thinking of your business and your family, hopefully find some of the relevant questions. And therefore, we need to go into a little bit more structured way of looking at it. A family business has three axes. It has an ownership axis. Usually a business starts with a sole owner, the founder, right? The founder has children and maybe they all become owners. They are a sibling partnership. And in the third generation, we often then have cousin consortiums. And much later, maybe we have family dynasties. I just 2 days ago had a long discussion with the president of the board of the Röchling group in Germany. And they are now 7th generation, and they have more than 200 owners. Now, that is what we call a family dynasty. At the beginning, all businesses are owner managed. Some businesses are still owner managed in the 20th generation. I've interviewed for a research project the CEO, the boss of a large and very famous winery in Germany. And they are now, as far as they see from their books, the 33rd generation. It's still an owner manager and still a sole owner. So it's not always related to age. Many family businesses are family managed, or there are family members and non-family members, but family is still very active in management. But then there are other families, like a Spanish family. I don't know whether you know the Chupa Chups, the sweets. They decided that for the next generation, it would be better if the family is only controlling the business and management goes to non-family members. That would be a completely different presentation. There are pros and cons, but you need then different structure. And then there are family investment companies that often are family owned, but not anymore family managed or controlled. And the business itself, what is it, your business? Is it still a rather small entrepreneurial family-owned business, or is it a focused business? It's only in one market. You have the one product, and I don't know whether you have fans of soccer, of Bayern München. Uli Hoeneß, who managed Bayern München for a long time, started a company to make sausages. And it was only one sort of sausage for only one customer, namely Aldi, another family business well known in Germany. Now, you have different questions if you hand on ownership of such a focused business compared to a business like, for example, the Oetker company, where you have the food area, and then you have had shipping, they sold it, you have a bank, you have, you know, this kind of diversified ownership, which has different questions for the incoming owners to cope with. And then we have family investment offices or family offices as the last thing. And all these models have different questions, and we often develop in a different way. So let's look at the question. I took out the sole owner. There is a dependence upon this owner. And there is a succession topic. Why is there a succession topic? Because a sole owner has the governance structure structured for sole ownership. Now, when this changes, it's so important. And if it's also owner managed, as I assumed for this example, an owner managed business that is belonging to a single person is completely dependent upon this person. This person having a car crash and the company is in trouble, right? So you have to take care for that, looking out. And when you then have a diversified family business, for example, you need professional portfolio management, and often you have a reduced emotional value. Let me tell you in a few sentences what that means. Most family business owners really love their businesses. Oftentimes, I'm warning them not to love the business more than the family, because then the family becomes a little bit jealous. And the more diversified the business becomes, the harder it is to identify with all of these branches. So usually, an owner has a most beloved child. So I love my, shipping part more than my banking part, or I love my food part more than my whatever. And the identification, especially of the next generation, then is much harder as if you have just one product. So different questions in different areas. And with the change of generation, so from the first to the second, the questions change. I'm now talking to you as the actual owners, understanding that with the change of ownership, the questions change. So you have been dealing successfully with a question of your generation, but the question of the next generation most likely are different questions. So you have to take care and think about the questions that the next generation has to address in order to become a responsible owner, which, for example, might be sibling rivalry. And I can hear responses like, my children don't fight. No, they don't, as long as you're in the room. Don't underestimate how much influence we have as fathers and mothers on the perceived harmony of the family. You go into a family managed group, there is rivalry. You know, I mean, I'm of course the most qualified. I'm of course the one who knows everything best. And of course, I don't understand why my brother doesn't accept it. We had this, my brother and I. I'm the older sister. And I'm kind of lectured him all the way, which didn't improve our relationship. And we finally paralyzed the family's business after the death of my father, because nobody foresaw it. As long as my father was in the room, there was no conflict. The moment he passed away, we started. Now we are good again, but it took us a long time. And when you are wise in preparing the next generation, give it a thought to help your next generation to really understand how they can work together without their parent generation being still in the room. If you have a family managed businesses and you prepare the next generation owner, the next generation owner has to understand that the active owner, the one who's managing the business, has different goals, a different focus than me as a non-active owner. We need to prepare them for understanding that, and we need them to be prepared to the different stages of our businesses. Last but not least, it's not only the next generation who has to become a responsible owner, it's also us as the now gen to allow them to be one. Right? Let go control. Examples are around the world. This is international. And interestingly, if I'm watching my own, observing my own age group, and I'm seeing the same, what I thought we will never do. I think every generation does it in a way, and it's very hard to let go control. But the only way for the next generation to take on the ownership responsibilities is for our generation to give them the chance. And then support them. Do me a favor, only do it when they ask for it. I don't think I need to read all of this for you. Preparation of the now again needs structure. Succession plan should be written down, even if you later do it a little bit differently, but sit down and communicate with the next generation how you envision it. Take their questions, take the controversy. It's hard, but it's worth it. Communication within the now gen. Talk to your fellow siblings and cousins. How do we want to structure this? And private plans. What do you do when you are out of power? I mean, do you go and play golf, or do you collect literature, or what are you doing? After transferring ownership, two-way communication. The next gen taking over has to respect that their parents' generation did the best they can do, and they did a great job. At the same time, it's not disrespectful to change something because time is moving on, right? Respect for the achievement of the predecessors, but also respect of the leaving generation for the engagement of the successors. And the old generation keep the family together. The family is the basis of the business. If the family falls apart, the family business ends. It might still be a business, but not a family business anymore. Keep telling your family story. An entrepreneurial legacy is the foundation of a long-term success. Thank you very much, and I'm very happy to take your questions and hopefully have the one or other answer later on. This is something that I found in a little store somewhere, and Hanouf, maybe we can share it because I really like it, but I don't want to read it.
Thank you very much, Sabina, for this insightful presentation. It definitely is very rich in content and information. I'm sure everyone was or saw the benefit of what you shared with us today, as we saw it as well. So thank you so much. I would like maybe to turn to Rami at this point and ask him about his views on what you shared with us today, because Rami, mashallah, is obviously at a young age is already leading his own family's business, and this indicates that he has already gone through a very proper it seems on the outside at least a proper process of being groomed as a future owner and a leader of this business. So Rami, could you share with us your thoughts about what Sabina presented today from your lived experience as a leading family business member in Saudi?
Sure, thank you, and good evening. First of all, I just need to make a clarification. I'm the CEO. I'm not the chairman yet. My father is the chairman. He's the now generation. I'm the next generation, and I'm incredibly privileged and lucky that I really associate incredibly well with what I've seen here, because I'm really happy and privileged that my father did most of these things, that the positive things that you have here, and in a way that was not overbearing and not enforcing, and I think it worked out well. But it was really enlightening to see what you've shared with us today, and I think I can relate to a lot of it.
Great. That's very good news, I think, for your family's business at least. And we can actually see it, mashallah, and Rami, we hear and we can read about your achievements in your own family's business all around the news and the media. So it's quite obvious what the good work that your father have done in grooming you for this difficult role. So if we take Sabina's elements or factors one by one, so on the experience and skills, the individual level factors which she explained, what can you tell us from your own experience? Was there like a conscious approach from your parents to basically groom you or develop certain competencies and skills? Was it clear to you that some are geared towards the ownership role while others maybe towards the leadership role? Like, what can you tell us about that sort of development of your skills and competencies? Since when did it start? How did it happen in your case, etc.?
Okay, so I think, most from what I've read and what I've experienced, and I don't think I think most entrepreneurs start off thinking about how to find the solution to a certain problem that they become passionate about, or have a passion that they want to pursue. I don't think they start out thinking about building a family sort of business or a family dynasty, right? And when I speak to my father about that, I mean, he started as an employee in Saudi Aramco, and then he decided that he wanted to be on his own, and he wanted to be able to pursue his passion of contributing to learning and education in the Arab world. And so he realized that he needed to make some money to do that. So, and that was really the driver. And when he left Aramco, he didn't really have a plan, as per what he says. He didn't really have a grand plan. But I think we go back to an important part about having about any family business or any organization, family or business, is having a purpose. And I think very early on, he and my mother had a very clear purpose in their lives, that they wanted to contribute to sustainable development in Saudi Arabia in terms of in terms of especially part of society and giving back. And so that was very essential in our family from very young age, that you've got to do, what are you going to do to give back? What are you going to do to make an impact on society? And it was always open. The choice was always open, which I'm lucky that was the case. And so it was never forced on me that you're going to come and work in the family business. So but the purpose and the question was always there. What are you passionate about, and what are you going to do with that passion, and what are you going to do to give back to the community? So it was after a while, after I went to college and so on, that I decided that no, I was very clear, and it was through a lot of communication and exchange and finally a commitment that you know, if I'm going to work in the business, that I have to be committed. And so it wasn't just you know, one day I decided I'm going to do it. So it took time, but throughout that process, they were putting me in situations and introducing me to opportunities and so on that would help me, you know, become a leader. And so I think that's something that's crucial from a very young age. And even just, you know, that's why I say following, you know, all the steps that Sabine talked about in her presentation. So, you know, having experiences at a young age in different organizations around the world, and then also working outside of the family in different countries. So all of that kind of thing helped to prepare me. And then also coming back and working in the company in different levels and different positions, and growing with time and building confidence and being allowed to make mistakes. That was a huge area, a huge point. And then, you know, slowly giving up control from a management perspective, while he's still there to guide and advise. So, you know, I think he managed it. You know, I think he managed it beautifully, and still here to give that overall advice and governance. And my sister is also involved in the business, but from a governance perspective, she sits on the board, and she's active in her own right as a CEO of an organization in Riyadh. But so I think so that's why I said I really relate a lot to what I've seen from the presentation.
Great. Thank you so much. And I can only wish that your father was actually part of our discussion today. I'm sure he would have taught us all a lot of valuable lessons, and other families as well, because again, we can see the results of his hard work already taking shape. Sabina, I feel... Sorry.
Thank you. I think one other point I want to mention is, I think also in keeping with the tradition here, and this is not, I'm sure there are many other families there are definitely many other families in Saudi and elsewhere who have similar experiences and are doing wonderful, you know, wonderful things and handing over from generation to generation. We're just the second generation. There are families with much longer history and more successful and so on. But I think one of the things that I think is also important, and it's rooted in this culture, is storytelling. I mean, that's something that, you know, as long as I can remember, my father, and always sharing stories, be it about experiences in the business or from his father, just about life and life stories and teaching through stories. So this is also Arab very rooted in Arab culture and Saudi culture as well, and I think it's crucial. And you mentioned that, you know, the communication and spending time with the kids, the next generation, and just sharing stories and sharing knowledge through stories.
Thank you so much, Rami. I believe the last point that you mentioned is actually an important one, and not only in Saudi. We can see, I've worked with Sabina, and I learned so much from her, being an expert in this field as my PhD supervisor when I was doing my PhD in London in the topic. So this actually is an important factor. We saw it in her presentation, the legacy, the family legacy. And tomorrow we actually have a session with Professor Peter Jazgovich, who's also part of, who was one time Sabina's PhD student as well. And Peter is actually presenting a whole paper about this entrepreneurial legacy and the legacy of the family being passed down the generations. Sabina, I'm sure I feel that you also want to say something about this, so please go ahead.
I don't want to tell anything about what Peter is doing tomorrow.
No, about legacy.
There's one thing that you, Rami, said about the purpose. When you have a clear purpose in why you are doing business and why you are telling your children why you are doing business, and the purpose goes beyond yourself and your family, so it's giving back to society, then it's much easier for a young generation to relate to this purpose, and with that to the business, because it's not that I'm looking at my father and the business is taking away something, but I'm standing next to him, shoulder by shoulder, and we are looking into the same direction. And I see him moving, and it's like, okay, I want to go down the same path. And that is much more motivating than anything else. So the purpose that goes beyond my family and my business makes it much easier, first to have this legacy and to tell the stories, but also to motivate and to find the way. And it's also something that helps me to correct myself if I'm getting a little bit, beside the path. So purpose is really a center, and it's oftentimes that when you see older families with their businesses failing, that they somehow lost the grip on purpose. They don't know why they are doing what they are doing anymore.
I think it's a good point, and also something that I've learned to believe in, and something that we, I think is important to understand and accept about when you talked about it, about what does it mean to be an owner, and is this business really about serving you and your family, or is it really something to serve the community? Because these businesses have stakeholders that stretch much, much further beyond the family. And, you've got all these people and their families and their dependents, be it locally or internationally, especially in Saudi, because we have a lot of guests and people here working here and contributing here that have families and dependents in other countries. So what does it mean to be an owner? It's an incredible responsibility. And it's not that it's just about making the most for yourself and how do you gain the most out of this business. It's how do you make a more of an impact on the community and society, and thinking about yourself as a custodian for the future generation of your family and those that work with you. And you think about, the stakeholders, be it suppliers, how many companies that supply your companies that are surviving because of that business, and your customers and their customers, and so on. So it's a huge network, and thinking about it as that, as a custodian, helps you to really, or helps me to think about the way we invest, the way we reinvest, the way we manage, the way we think about long-term rather than short-term gains.
Yeah, I remember, I have to share this anecdote with you. One of my first lectures I gave when I was a professor at King's College in London, and the students wanted to talk about social entrepreneurship. And so I said, okay, what is a social enterprise? And they said, well, that is founding an enterprise that does something for the society that the society values. And I said, yes, and what does a normal business? And they looked at me like, what are you talking about? Because they thought only the social entrepreneur does something for society, all others are just self-serving. So we had a very, very vivid discussion with an international group of students, because I was just a little bit shocked and tried to give them the family business view on the purpose goes beyond your business and beyond your family. And this is where you can unite the family and you can unite the owners and also the people working with you. And part of, let me share that as well, part of the success of the so-called German Mittelstand oftentimes is that the family business family goes far beyond the family. It's all the families that contribute and work and support this business. And that is a different type of motivation. It's one you cannot, of course you pay, but it's not a paid for motivation.
Right. I mean, that's one of the reasons why you see family businesses or family owned businesses, be it private or public even, in general, they do better than especially when you look at publicly listed companies that are not so, or maybe that have a fragmented, let's say, investor base, because they're generally focused on short-term gains rather than long-term sustainability. So when you have a majority ownership, be it family, generally it's a lot of times it's family, they're thinking much more about the long term. And there are many great examples of that.
This is, by the way, why it is really important to have professional structures and at the same time this family spirit. Because if the family spirit kind of is the only thing and the business grows and grows and becomes more complex, and I know families who they reject becoming more professional because they think they are then less family wise. And I always try to tell them, some of them don't listen, to be honest, that being professional as the way I organize the business and at the same time being long-term family purpose-oriented, when these two things come together, you are really strong, but you need both to stand on.
Thank you so much, Sabina, and thank you, Peter. Sorry, Rami. Peter is on my mind because of that entrepreneurial legacy bit still. Rami, actually, no, this question is for you, Sabina, and then I would like to have Rami's reflections as well. So you stress on future owners who are not dependent on the business for their living as a heaven on earth for family businesses, which I fully agree with you, and I'm sure many people do agree with you as well. But you also cover the aspect or the factor of the importance of next gen owners to be motivated to become owners. So, and it's a bit of a difficult balance to achieve, let's be honest, because yeah, we want you to be motivated to own a business that is very difficult to be an owner at, just as Rami mentioned, and then but again, we don't want you to also depend on the dividends for your own living. So it's a how yeah, from your own experience working with families in Germany who and from all around the world who has made this balance happen, how can Saudi family businesses make it happen in your view?
Well, to raise children in a way that they really become independent in a respectful way is very challenging, and that's around the world with all families. And some families decide not to go down that road because then you get a lot of questions and so on. So that's the first thing. First, raising children for becoming independent person is one of the things that happens within the first 6 years of a child, right? So if we look at developmental psychology, once we as consultants join family businesses, it's the last act of the Shakespearean drama. The first acts have long happened. But apart from that, what I learned from the families I've been working with, if the parents, uncles, aunts really love this and kind of give the role model that it is a gift and that they are grateful that they are allowed to be in this position and that they work hard to be in that position, those children have a positive kind of picture in their head. And then there are some parents who always complain about everything. It's so much, and all this conflict, and all this discussions, and blah, blah, blah. And then at the end of the day, they wonder why the children don't want to become owner or don't want to join. It's all in their own communication. And we all have this kind of blank spots in our own way of interacting. This is why larger family groups oftentimes raise more motivated owners, because these children have more role models, more communication, and more idea. And I think, as far as I've learned from you, Hanouf, you have really in Saudi still these family groups. So really make use of it, because that is a real resource to get motivated owner. And last sentence, any young person who is where we request that they take care for themselves and their own living, has a different way of being at the same time proud and humble. As a young person that I kind of pay for, as a mother, as a father, and they don't develop what we call a self-worth, and also they don't believe that what they do makes a difference. But when you have to take care of yourself, you learn it makes a difference what you are taking, and at the same time that you are responsible and humble, there you are. Last word, if you have 10 children, most likely 2 or 3 will become brilliant owners, 1 or 2 will be dropouts, and the rest is somewhere in the middle. So don't ask yourself as a parent to raise them all to the best future owner. Most likely you will fail.
Yeah.
You know, I think I want to add something that I think is important about, you know, I agree with you about, you know, having raising the kids to be independent and to be to really have experiences where they can, you know, build their personalities and their capabilities and build their trust, their confidence in themselves. And I think one of the things about being humble and having humility is making kids or the next generation work in sales. And I've seen some families in Saudi do this, and you know, I've done it, and I'm always in sales, of course. As a CEO, I have to be out selling, but I think it's a really humbling experience, and because so many times, you know, I grew up, you know, in the lap of luxury. Alhamdulillah, my father did the hard work, and I came in to a beautiful, you know, life and easy life. So when you go out and you're used to being always, you know, people catering to you and you asking for anything, and you know, it's given to you. You go out into the real world, and selling makes you have to go and try to convince somebody to do what you want them to do, which is buy from you, right? And that's a very hard process. Now there's a science behind it, and there's a lot of learning and training to be done. But I think having next generation spend good time, spend a considerable time in sales and succeeding in sales builds their confidence, builds their capabilities, and helps them to be better leaders and better owners.
Mm-hmm. I fully agree, and I must second you on that, Rami. I've seen it happen in reality with some of the family businesses, and it's a very good point. This particular sales experience is really extremely humbling because it takes those family business or business family members from being on top of things in their normal life to basically, yes, being in that difficult position, having to convince someone to buy their products or services. So I fully agree with you. Thank you for making that point. I would like to go back to you reflecting on the question I asked Sabina earlier. I'm not going to ask you about to what extent, if at all, you are dependent on dividends, because I understand that is a very private matter, but you seem to be a motivated owner. So how does this motivation part work in your own experience?
You are asking Rami, right?
Rami, yes.
Oh, sorry, the question was to me. I thought it was to Sabine. Sorry. Sorry, I zoned out. I thought you were talking to her. Please repeat.
So yeah, definitely. So I was just asking, how do you feel about the work that has been done to motivate you to become a future
sorry.
owner? Although you said it's a very difficult place to be. So
no, I agree with you, and it's something, you know, I think I mentioned it earlier. It's a delicate balance, right? Because in our example, it's just myself and my sister. So, you know, my father from very early on, he never said you will do this and you will join the company and all that. No, he always said, listen, I will get you educated, best education. You choose what you want to do, but you must be of service. You must do your best. I don't want you, in whatever you choose to do, you must really, be passionate about it and strive and do your best, right? But it's got to be something of value to society. It's got to be something where you're also, there's an element of giving back for all the wonderful things that you've been blessed with, that God has blessed us with. So, but it was never pushing to say, you're going to come and join the business. And so that sort of pushed him, but he gave me opportunities. He was always telling me stories about, he was always sharing things about what's going on in the business. So it's continuous communication until, he's my role model. He's my, that role model, right? And and mentor. So I just was always thinking about those things, and I was always gravitating towards that. And I was excited about working with him, but it was always in a very soft, of course, I'm sure he had it. He was guiding, but it didn't feel that way. It felt like it was my choice. So that's always a much better process than the other way around.
Oh, it's a very clever approach. It's a kind of a soft pull in a way, So I must congratulate your father for his ability to utilize. He's just done a fantastic job. And that takes me to a question about your father. As Sabina mentioned, this whole process also requires some role from the now generation, or your father, the older generation, because they also have to know when is it time to let go of control, to provide support to the next generation, to do this and that. They're part of the process. It's not just, the next generation having the skills, the competencies, etc., to become those future owners. So, and we know, I'm sure we know from our experiences working with families, researching them, etc., that this is a very difficult decision for older generations to make, and to actually let go of control, because the business is their entire life. They don't know anything else but that business. So can you tell us about that process, how it happened in your own family, and how if you can just tell us more about it, because it seems that you have a very beautiful experience to share with other families.
So I think it has to be a measured process. It has to be balanced, and that's where the wisdom of experience but it has to be a thought out process. And that's what I think, my father did. He was always thinking about long term and thinking about how and training and developing and giving opportunities to learn and make mistakes and so on and so forth, and being, sort of that push and pull kind of approach. But he had a plan, and it's important to do it. It may not be a perfect science, but it's very important that it's done in a methodical way. I think maybe sometimes maybe the timing wasn't so great, or it was maybe a little bit too early or late, but we didn't really have much of a choice. He only has one son, and my sister had to move away with her husband and family, so it was maybe her participation would be more difficult.
May I add an example?
Sure.
One of the rituals that I've learned from a family, or two families to be clearer, and most of you might know the company because it's the Miele company doing the washing machines and all this kind of stuff. It's a large family business, 5th to 6th generation, and there are always one member of each family, two families owning it, that are on the board. And after transferring it to the next generation, although this was management transference, but I think the idea overall is a very good one, they had a breakfast once in the week, Monday morning, 6:30, the two fathers who stepped down and the two sons who stepped up. And there was the promise that the sons will always inform the fathers about every relevant decision before the Workers' Council or the press or anybody else will get the notice of the relevant decisions. And at the same time, the fathers promised that they will not interfere or will not give their comments publicly on the decisions taken by their sons. So the idea to have a ritual between the two generations after transferring ownership, where the young generation informs the older generation what they are doing, and at the same time with the discipline of the older generation, not to kind of overrule the younger generation's decision, I think that is something that is easy to install in a family, and it's very helpful. It's again about communication that helps the one to let go control and the other to assume control.
Yeah, I think it's a good example. I think, you know, it comes back to building the trust, and it's a long process. It's not something that can happen at the time only, you know, at the later time. It's about how you raise the child and, you know, having that open communication and trust to be transparent and share. But also, I think it's about having the structure, having structures where you have reporting and authority and governance and so on and so forth, and then always respecting it, because some family patriarchs or leaders, because they started it and they know everybody and so on, they'll undermine the next generation, and that's just a disaster, right? And that's something that, you know, I'm really blessed that, you know, my father was always, and he would have people from the organization come to him, you know, bypassing me, but he would always push them back to me to make that decision. So, you know, that sort of contract between the now generation and the next generation is very important. But having the structures also for governance and delegation of authority and reporting, it's all just good practices. I want to add another point that I think is important for the now generation is they have to, and everybody has to have something that you know, outside of the business. Because if they don't have a passion or a purpose outside of the business, then it becomes very, very difficult, because their whole life and their whole personality becomes so associated with that business that they can't disassociate from it. So, yeah, my father is passionate about education and human development, and has so many different organizations that he's involved with, and constantly learning about new things and so on. So for, you know, he's extremely busy with the other areas that he's involved with. So, and that's where he's passionate about. So I think that's also important for all of us.
Yeah. Well, this brings me back to the purpose, because if it's purpose beyond the family and business, and I'm leaving control as the now gen to the next gen, the purpose is still there. And you can serve a purpose in so many ways. So if I want to give back to society, I can do this by working politically, or I can work in education, or I can do any other things. But still with the same purpose, I can do something that gives sense to my life. But if my identity is tied to the business, so if I am the business and the business is me, I cannot leave myself.
There's a problem. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this very interesting discussion. I have one last question for you, Rami, before we maybe move to the audience Q&A. I would like to also cover maybe or understand your own experience when it comes to introducing you and making you an accepted future owner amongst the different stakeholders in the business, whether it's the family, whether it's clients, employees, the wider society. There must have been a process of introducing you to these groups and them accepting you. Otherwise, maybe you would have not been able to function well as you are functioning today within that ecosystem of your own family business. So what can you tell us about your experience in that sense?
So I can tell you is what I learned, Danny, from that experience. First of all, I think, just, being respectful and having humility and showing that to people, that's the most important thing. Because if you're going to show respect to people, then they're gonna give you a shot. They're gonna give you an opportunity, and then it's about how you do it. But if you come in and you're not showing respect and you're coming from the top and you're saying, you work for me and that kind of approach, then it's clearly it's not going to work. The other thing that's important is having a successful story elsewhere, outside of the family business. So I started working in New York in consulting, and I did that for about 3 years, and I demonstrated success in that area where I developed, I was promoted, and so on. And so I came with ideas, with experience, with knowledge, with some knowledge, but also process and practice and so on. So that's important. And then having experiences where you can, coming in at not at the top, coming in at different levels, and working really hard, showing people that you're working harder or as hard as everyone else, and having success. You have to have quick wins to show that you're successful, and that's the role of the now gen, to put you in opportunities where you can succeed, and if people can see that you're making positive impact and you're making success, that builds your confidence, and it shows others that you're working hard, you're succeeding, and then you move up.
Very interesting point. Thank you so much for sharing it. It's a very enjoyable discussion, but we're running out of time. So if you have one final advice or something to say to family businesses in Saudi, we start with you, Rami, and then we go to Sabina, and then we move to the audience questions. So what advice would you have for Saudi family businesses when it comes to this topic that we're discussing today, which is preparing future owners?
Yeah, I think it's about planning, thinking long term. What do you want? So we talked about having a purpose, and what do you want for your family, and what do you want for your business? I mean, these are two different things that Sabine talked about as well, that I fully agree with. And part of that plan is, building your next gen as respectful, humble people who want to make a contribution to their family, but also to society, and let them have experiences outside of the group, let them work outside, away, very far away from the family, probably outside of the country too, which would be even better, where they go somewhere and they don't know them. I did that in New York. Nobody knew who I was. Or who my family was. So that was very important. Yeah. And definitely work in sales. You have to work in sales, at least some portion of your plan. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sabina, please go ahead.
I would say 3 things. The one thing is organize your business as professional as you can. Have the structures in place. We always say, run your business that you can go IPO tomorrow, and run it as well that you don't have to go IPO ever. And concerning the family, for the now gen, keep the family together, communicate, and have trust in the next generation. And for the next generation, have trust in yourself, build your competencies, and then rock the chair. I mean, succession is not something that is granted, but that is taken. It's not nice for the now gen, and I know this, but you need to step up and say, here I am.
Thank you so much, Sabina. So I'll just maybe try to cover a few questions from the audience before we end the session. We have a question asking about the criteria that should be there in the future successor. So what would you say the criteria should be in a future successor for a family business or a business family?
There are three types of criteria that you have. There is criteria concerning personality. If you want to become an owner in a family business, there has to be a high level of integrity. There has a high level of communication skills, and there has to be humbleness. Then there is as a criteria to develop what do they have to know and what kind of experience do they have to have. This is something that you have to develop really for the business. And from my experience, the best way to do this is to talk to the family, depending how big it is, but you can develop these criteria under a good moderation with all family members from both generations. Usually the family that has built the business to this point knows it best. It's not somebody from outside to tell you what you need for your business. You know your business. This is why you are successful. But then sit down, listen to the next generation. They have some ideas. Build the criteria early and communicate them. Because the thing is, if the next generation does not know to what criteria they have to live up to, for what they should be prepared. For example, like Rami said, the criteria is you have to be working successfully in sales for at least 2 or 3 years. Now that needs to be communicated before the next gen turns 30, right? It's not fair to come at the end of the process and say, well, you could have imagined. No. So that criteria. And lastly, there has to be a fit within the group. So there's also the criteria that there is acceptance in the relevant stakeholder groups, among the family, among other shareholders, and among the key employees and suppliers and customers. So those would be the group of criteria. And the only thing easy to answer is the personality part, because that is about the same in every family business.
Rami, do you have anything to add from your experience on this?
I think, and I agree with everything that Sabina said, and I think I mentioned a few points earlier, so I think.
Yeah. Okay, so we have another question asking, how can we achieve a balance between the family and the business in this process?
Yeah. Sorry, can you repeat that?
How can a balance be achieved between the family and the business throughout this process?
And that's one of the most difficult, because as Dr. Sabine said, it's how do you, especially for the now generation or the founding generation that they lived with it, it's part of them. How to make it's got to be a conscious effort. It's got to be done like the proper constitution, family constitution and business, but also making time for the family, and not one of the most challenging things is when you're sitting as a family, or when we're sitting together, my father and I and the rest of the family, avoiding to talk about business when it's family time. That's very hard. That's really difficult. But it's important, and I definitely don't do a good job of that. But having a life, having activities and pursuits and interests and activities outside of the business is crucial. But you have to have a proper plan for it. It's a conscious effort. It can't just happen. You've got to have that balance. You've got to decide how to have that separation. And as Dr. Sabine said earlier, the worst thing is to lose the family over something related to business.
That's very true. Sabina, please.
Yeah, the one thing that I would like to add, I completely agree, is every family has to find its own way. There is nothing like a recipe. It's a very, very crucial balance, yes, but it's also different whether you have many siblings or not. If you've got a large group of siblings, as I have with one family I'm working with, the parents don't have so much time for each of the siblings. But if there is only the one child, it's a different story. So each family has to find its own solution. And then, yes, I completely agree with what you said, Rami, and really being aware that you have time that is a no business time, right? On the other hand, I remember my father took me into the factory on weekends, and I was then allowed to drive the car, although I was only 12 or 14, and that really made me love the company. There are different ways of making the one or the other a little bit more attractive.
This is actually a very interesting point, if I may add. We had in the earlier session today, Dr. Basma Zamil pointed out, she comes also, just for you to Sabine to follow, she also comes from a business family, a very leading business family, actually, or family business in Saudi. And so she said, we actually have this program in the company to build a relationship between the company and the future, the kids, the new generations. And we make it very clear to the kids that this is from the company, it's not from the family. So in order to build up that kind of emotional attachment or psychological, which is very important. I thought that is a very nice approach that they have in the Zamil group to build this attachment between the family and the business, and then you kind of maybe find a way to balance up the two in a way. So I just wanted to share that example because it crossed my mind as you were discussing. Well, we came, I guess, to the end of the session. It's been a very enjoyable discussion. Thank you so much, Sabina, for your presentation. Thank you so much, Rami, for sharing your insights. And thank you so much to the National Center for Family Business for having us in this session to discuss this very important topic. Of course, we cannot thank the audience enough for participating and attending and giving the time to basically share their questions and to want to learn more about the recent thoughts on family businesses. We hope this is just a beginning and not an end. Maybe we're wishing to have such forums on annual basis where we can bring more and more academics and researchers and to bridge the gap between the knowledge that is already out there and those who need it on the ground, as in family businesses in Saudi and maybe tomorrow or even in the region. So thank you so much for your participation. Thank you so much for your time. And we hope to see you all again tomorrow in the remaining sessions in this forum. We have some interesting topics. We hope that you actually join us as well. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye bye.